Welcome to episode 33 of the Youth Ministry Podcast for volunteers. If you're a volunteer who works with teenagers, this is the podcast for you. You are in the right place, and we're so glad that you're back. Welcome to 2024 and a new season. We're super excited. Hey, I'm Chris Trent, and I work with the Next Gen Ministry for the Georgia Baptist Mission Board. I've worked with teenagers for a little over 30 years now, and I simply love pointing them to Jesus, and I love volunteers for the very same reason, because they love that as well. Hey, and I'm blessed each week to be joined by my amazing co-host, Jennifer Fletcher, and she is back after a little bit of an absence there. Jennifer, you were on the Christmas Spectacular, but now you're back in the regular episodes. And you're a real life volunteer.
I'm a real life volunteer. I worked in student ministry for a while and then had my own kids and decided teenagers and toddlers all at once was too much. And so I volunteer with teenagers.
That's right.
Full time with toddlers.
Right. Yep, that's so cool. Are you? And you're thinking like right now, you're kind of part-time volunteer in the sense that you just had your baby, so you're doing some sub-type stuff. But you were talking earlier. There's a girls' weekend coming up. You're thinking about being a part of that thing, trying to work that out if everything cooperates.
This is super cool. The church that I volunteer in, I was on staff there, and a girl who was on staff, or a girl who was one of my students when I was on staff, she actually helped me create. I remember taking her to Moe's as the girls minister, and I said it would be great if we could come up with a girls weekend together. What should we call it? And she's helping me plan it, trying to get some student buy-in, and she is actually leading it this year for the first time.
Full circle.
And so has been really cool for me to get to watch her as an adult. Now she's a staff member and she's leading this trip, and it's awesome.
That's so good. Well, so glad you're back and you're going to join us for this season of the Youth Ministry Podcast for volunteers. Hey friends, before we jump into today's episode, please be sure to subscribe to the podcast on whatever podcast platform you use. And we really would love it if you would leave a review. We've had a few at this point now, and it's starting to help out, help spread the word as people do a search on their podcast platform, whatever they use. If they search Youth Ministry, by you leaving a review, it helps us. So thank you for doing that.
Yeah, and hey, we are super excited this week. We've got Todd Jones. Todd, you are in Duluth, and how was your Christmas? How's student ministry? You back 2024? I think I put an extra 20 in there.
Yeah, we're 2020, man, I'm
2020,
old now. So, yeah, we had a great...
Can you believe we're living in 2024? It's insane. Like, what is happening?
Great Christmas. Great to be back in the old youth ministry office. Had a leadership team meeting with my students today, and so just kind of back in the swing of things, and so just great to be back with you guys in 2024.
Yeah, Todd and I, Jennifer, we just got back from the MOVE conference, which is an event we do here in Georgia Baptist World, and we were down in Valdosta together with a little over 2,500 of our favorite people from Georgia,
just one or
and
two
a couple
friends.
other states. Just one or two friends. I had a blast down there. Saw so many teenagers make decisions for Christ. It was phenomenal.
Awesome.
Had some podcast friends walk up to us and say, "Hey, we listened," so that was super encouraging as well. So shout out to all the MOVE people who are listening. And I think we probably picked up some new listeners as well. So thanks for jumping on as a result of us promoting that thing.
That's right. Thank you, guys.
Well, hey, we're going to jump into this thing. Todd, what you got?
We are talking today about what if you as a youth ministry volunteer set yourself some goals this year in 2024.
Goals for your students, right? Not just life goals.
Well, we're
not so much interested in your generic life goals. Like if you're trying to lose weight,
are you going to go to the gym this year?
Yeah, are you going to go to the gym for 2 weeks?
Yeah,
it's
you be you. We're talking about youth ministry here.
That's right. It's
youth ministry goals.
It's about students, and so setting some goals for your students in your group as you're volunteering and leading those students.
Yeah, I think this is great because I think everybody at the start of a new year, they tend to evaluate a little bit what's gone on the year before. They tend to think through how things are going. Well, what we're suggesting is maybe apply some of those same principles to how you do things as a volunteer, and maybe even set a couple goals, 1 or 2 or 3 goals for what you are doing with students. So we got a pretty good list here. We think it's pretty good, and hopefully this thing will be helpful. Jennifer, you're going to start us off.
Yeah, I would say my first goal for myself as a volunteer is just to start small. I am so guilty of maybe being a little nostalgic with New Year's resolutions, and I get all emotional and in my head, and I think, oh, my youth ministry volunteer life is going to look like a Pinterest board worthy amount of things that I'm going to do.
And for all of our
I
guys
never
listening,
accomplished any of
Pinterest
those.
is this website that you can post things on.
Probably dated at this point, but whatever. No, but I can just I get all these like idealistic pictures in my head of what my personal goals, my student ministry goals, my volunteer goals, and then I get overwhelmed, and so then I don't complete any of them. And so I'm telling myself this, as well as you, start small. Make a few goals with your group, maybe pick out 1 or 2 individual students and start there, and then build the habit of those goals, and then you'll see them carry on throughout the year in an easier fashion.
Yeah, I think
Yeah, I think
that's.
Go
Oh,
ahead,
sorry,
Todd.
Chris. I was just going to say that's important to start small. It really is, because again, we try to make these ginormous goals set for ourselves, and within, like I said, 2 weeks, you fail, and then you feel like you failed for the whole year. So I think that's a huge thing for volunteers in youth ministry.
Yeah, so your first goal should not be, I'm going to be the perfect youth ministry volunteer.
No,
with no mistakes. Like, it needs to be, show yourself some grace. But at the same time, I think biblically speaking, the idea of us continuing to grow in our faith and grow in our actions, was reading from Titus literally this morning that talked about growing in godliness and the expectations that we should have on ourselves as teachers, setting, evaluating some things and also setting some goals. I think it's going to be super helpful to make sure you're doing a good job, with the students that you've been blessed with. Awesome. I like it.
That's good.
How about you, Todd, number 2?
I'd say identify, when you're thinking about your students, identify where they are spiritually. One of the things that we have set up for our, we call them core group leaders, so our volunteers, is we say we want them to challenge every single Sunday. We want them to challenge each other in their spiritual growth. So our core group leaders, their goal is each Sunday to challenge somehow that week. Hey, what are you going to do with what you learned today? How are you going to take that and use it? And then also they encourage each other in their walk. So that's, throughout the week, trying to figure out, who can I give a little bit more encouragement to in their spiritual walk with Jesus this week.
Yeah, I think there's an
that's so
opportunity
good.
here, Todd. I think there's an opportunity to take a look at each of your students, and make sure that you are encouraging them, but not assuming that every student, just because they're showing up on a regular basis, are doing great in their walk with Jesus, right? So in that encouragement, taking the time to try to identify, hey, where are each of my students? Is it possible that this one kid that has been coming forever to our church, and whose parents have been coming forever to our church, really is struggling with their faith? And the only way we can identify that is if we take the time to try to have those conversations and ask specifically. So identifying, hey, of my 10 or 12 kids that, the Lord has trusted me with, I know I've had a conversation with them about whether or not they know Jesus, whether or not they made that decision to follow Christ. Maybe talking about some things like baptism. Have they been baptized? Are they spending time with the Lord? Are they having doubts? All those type of things. I think that could really be something that if you could set a goal, we're in January recording this thing, that by the end of, say, this semester, you've done that would be a pretty worthwhile goal.
I think it's so good too, because especially I think about like middle grades, like 8th and 9th grade, and maybe the tail ends of those. Sometimes students change, maybe they have accepted what their parents have taught them. They've grown up in a Christian home and they're like, yes, I'm on fire for the Lord, and they know everything mentally. And then they get into being influenced by school and thinking for themselves. And so maybe they need that checkpoint, not just assuming because they were solid as a 6th grader that they're still solid as a 7th or 8th grade or 9th, carry on, insert whatever year you have.
Yeah, and that goes back to that just simply not assuming.
Right.
And I think in church world, it's easy for us to kind of get caught up in this mindset of, well, they've been coming forever, or they look happy, or they look like, or their parent, that kid's dad is a deacon, or whatever.
Yeah. And you're then creating an environment where they can say, yeah, actually, I have had some doubts about faith recently.
Yeah.
And is Jesus worth it? And how beautiful for them to ask those questions in student ministry before they enter off into adulthood. That's awesome.
Yeah, and they need another voice. That's
For
the
sure.
one thing
Good word.
that as a volunteer they need.
Sounds like a
another
dad
voice.
talking there, Todd.
Yeah, they need another voice, not just
Yep.
not just parents, not just if you have a youth pastor at your church, but another voice speaking truth into their
For
lives
sure.
and challenging and encouraging. So it's huge.
That's a good word.
sure.
That's a good word. Well, hey, so here's where we're at. We're talking about if a youth ministry volunteer were to set goals, what are some things we think you might? Well, first of all, we reminded you start small. We don't want to overwhelm anybody. We're not trying to come down. We're not trying to stress anybody out here. Set small goals. A few things, and we started with identify where each of your students are spiritually. Now, what we want to suggest is maybe just take a moment to evaluate what is your prayer strategy. And I don't mean to unspiritualize it when I say that, but what is your prayer strategy for your students? And here's what I mean. How are you praying for your students? Are you praying this generic kind of broad prayers, or are you taking the time to pray on a regular basis? Maybe that's daily, or maybe that's 2 or 3 of your students each day, but you're taking the time to pray specific things. And maybe even take a look and think, hey, how could we involve the church in this as well? What do y'all think?
I think that's a great idea. We did the Pray For Me campaign a few years ago.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah, and it's such a powerful tool. But what we try to do is we try to get every time each 6th grader that comes into our youth group, we try to get a senior adult to basically just bond with a family and pray for that 6th grader over and over again. And so that's something maybe here in the new year you can do that with some of your students that are in your small group, is get somebody outside of the youth ministry to pray for those students with you. And that's just a small way you can do that.
Love
I
it.
love that. Yeah. And that kind of leads into what we're talking about. Our next point is really the same thing that you're saying, to connect. And so whether we're connecting multi-generationally within our church or connecting with our students or parents, it's great to have all these goals. And we just did some podcasts talking about how to stay connected during the break. The break is over. It's time to connect in person again. And, to steal from Young Life's saying that they've always done, connect on your turf, connect on their turf. And so making sure that you're finding times, whether it's, bringing donuts. I know some of our schools around here where I am and volunteering are really strict. We can't really get in and see them. And so I loved during finals or the start of a school year, I would just bring some Dunkin' Donuts or sometimes some Walmart donuts, let's be real, and just drop them off at the front desk and write the students' names. And then they get called to the front office, which is so much fun for you as a volunteer. But just make sure that you're connecting with students, checking back in with them. It can be in small ways like that. It can be in personal ways. And then also make sure that you're connecting with the parents. Just a reminder, hey, my name is Jennifer. I'm volunteering with your students. This is not weird, but I, want to hang out. And also parents sometimes can let you know, like, hey, thanks so much for reaching out. They're really stressed about this thing coming up, or they are not friends with so-and-so anymore, or any of those family dynamics that you need to be filled in on.
You can even go back to the one we just talked about before, Jennifer, and say, you can even say, how can I be praying for your family?
For
how
sure.
can I be praying for your
sure.
student? And they may say something like, hey, pray for him because he's really struggling with that one. And, you don't want to get too personal there. You don't want parents, because some parents might
Right.
talk too much in that moment. But they might share something like you didn't know they were struggling with. So,
Well,
that's
and
good.
like we want to minister to these families and to these teenagers, but it's hard to teach teenagers that Jesus is worth it if their families are not on board. And so the more we can minister to the whole family, the more they all together can see, hey, life with Jesus really is better. Let's choose this way of life.
It's good.
That's great. And our last one is do a spiritual checkup on yourself. So when you're I know. When you're thinking about...
Get all up in my business, Todd.
That's
Back
right.
off.
When you're setting goals, set some spiritual goals for yourself. Because, again, we've heard it for years and years, but this generation can sniff out inauthenticity like crazy.
Yeah.
They're looking for somebody to be authentic in their life. And if you're not spending time with Jesus, if you're not growing in your relationship with Jesus, it truly does show. And so, guys, what are some ways you guys do that? What are some goals you set for yourself to again, grow yourself spiritually?
Yeah, I liked it. Jennifer, in our pre-show, she was the one that kind of owned up to this being a problem for her. So I'm just kidding.
I did.
I'm just kidding.
I have a newborn. Life is rough.
She does have a new
She's like,
baby.
man,
We
I
will
barely
give her that.
survived the,
Give me
I
some
thought it was
credit,
great.
guys.
Yeah. I think it's great. You're showing the baby monitor, like legit.
Yeah,
that's how.
here she is.
That's
Yeah.
what this world is right. Yeah, I mean, I think you're right though, man. Getting through 2023 towards the end of all that, and honestly, I actually said to Wendy at one point because we're going through Advent together, and I was like, "What does it say about me that the 25th, 26th, and 27th were probably my weakest days from the standpoint of spending time in the Word?" Because I'm so
Yeah.
busy and all that stuff, right?
Uh-huh.
So I think it is time to do a little bit of a checkup and just kind of say, hey, how am I doing this thing? And what I like the idea of setting goals, though. Like for me, that happens specifically in my what's kind of like my journal, my bullet journal, and not like a girly bullet journal, but a dude bullet journal. The way I keep
He
all my
found
notes
it
and
on
everything.
Pinterest.
Yeah.
Yeah, I found it out. No, I didn't.
I sent him
But
a
that
link.
said,
I'm just kidding.
I've got a prayer list in there, and I've got a daily spot to check off whether or not I spent time in prayer that day. And I'm going to be honest, as I looked back, I saw way too many blanks, spots where I didn't pray. And I'm not trying to beat myself up, but I know Jesus gives me grace in that. But I also in that was like, man, I need to not have so many blanks next year where I spend a whole day without taking the time to pray for the blessings of people in my life that God's blessed me with. So that's that, and I do He Reads Truth, which is super strong for me. And yeah, Jennifer, what about you?
Yeah, I was telling Chris earlier before we started recording, this is a goal of mine as a volunteer. Like, I can't be telling students about how great God is if I'm not daily in His Word and reminding myself of His truth on a regular basis. And so I would say before you do any other goals for your student ministry, sit down. Are you having daily time with the Lord? And where maybe do you need to alter that and carve it out? And I feel you. I'm up all night with my newborn right now. I'm like, my schedule of waking up before my kids get up, it is gone, man. I don't have
I feel
it
like you're
anymore.
probably a
And so
little
I'm
bit
having
like
to be
Nancy.
creative.
Like Nancy Orberg. I read a book from Nancy Orberg, and she said, spend time with the Lord. I would just be happy to go to the bathroom by myself right now. Like, you're at that stage of life.
It is true. I locked the door so I could do this podcast. Someone might be on the other side of it right now. Who knows? But even in that, it is important, and it is important before you meet the needs of your family or your
Carve out the
jobs
time.
or anything else or your students. You have got to be filled with the Holy Spirit, and you've got to be in the Word.
Yep.
And so for me right now, I am, I ended an Advent study, and so January 1st hit, and I thought, oh, I guess I need to create a new study. What am I going to do?
Yeah, there you go.
I'm really enjoying listening, doing some audio stuff right now, and
Cool.
there's some
Awesome.
great resources. The Bible Recap's one of those that I'm into this year.
Oh, Wendy's doing that.
I've done it in the past. Yeah, it's a great one.
Yeah.
Just to help me stay focused is what I think that one is good for.
That's awesome. Yeah, and I was going to say that's a great example if you really think about setting a goal, but sometimes that goal may shift a little bit. Just kind of like for you, Jennifer, your life is kind of in a mixer right now. You're going every which way, but it's okay to shift. And again, I'm a person. I'm not a habit person. I'm not a huge like. I can do things different. Like, I like to go to restaurants and eat different things. And if you want to change up your devotion time, it's okay to change up. Some people think that they have to do it at same time, same thing, same day, whatever. But if you feel like you need to change it up, this is where Chris says, offer yourself grace. As long as you're spending time with the Lord, do that. Spend time with the Lord, but whatever you have to do. I read out of Experiencing God. I've used that devotional since I was 17 years old, long time, and so I've been using that for a long time. But then I also get in places where I just read, through chapters of the Bible, and just kind of get, just kind of focus on one chapter, and so that's kind of what I do.
That's good.
And it's good too, as we're talking, and you're thinking through the different ways that you need to mix it up and give yourself grace for different seasons. What a great lesson then to learn and to teach your students as they come to you in this new year. And hopefully some of them have goals to grow closer in their relationships with the Lord. So to be able, back to your point about being authentic, Todd, to be able to say, look, I get it. I've gone through seasons where it was really easy for me to be in God's Word, and seasons where I had to have some self-discipline to be in God's Word. But He always was faithful with my time. And so He will be faithful with you spending time with Him as well.
Well, y'all, that's good stuff. And that, here it is. If a youth ministry volunteer were to set goals, here are some of our thoughts. Start small. Identify where each of your students are spiritually. Maybe take time to figure out a prayer strategy, even maybe for your church to do as well. Connect in some capacity. Connect both with parents and with students. Just take the time to make sure you're connecting, because ultimately that leads to deeper relationships. And then finally, just do a spiritual checkup for yourself and maybe set some goals for this year when it comes to how you want to spend time in prayer and how you want to spend time in the Word. So that does it for today's episode. Hey, here's a question for y'all, though. Don't hit next just yet, because I have something different to tell you. Have you ever wanted to connect? This is for volunteers. Have you ever wanted to connect with other people who also work with teenagers? Well, hey, listen, I want to invite you to join our Student Ministry Network Facebook group. We've got a Facebook group that has been going on for a while now, and it is a very healthy group of folks that work with volunteers. It's a whole bunch of full-time youth pastors, bivocational youth pastors, and a whole bunch of youth ministry volunteers, and we spend time, on that group together, and it's really just a great place for you to ask for help if you have youth ministry issues or ideas, and everybody is super helpful to each other, and there's no snarkiness on there, because we don't put up with that on our in this particular Facebook group. We keep it clean and keep it super encouraging, and it's really not a place to debate theology and all that type of stuff. So, but hey, here's how you can find that group. If you go to studentministrynetwork.com, that's studentministrynetwork.com. If you scroll down, that is a link to our overall Next Gen page. But if you scroll down, there is a place that says Connect with us on Facebook. Connect on Facebook. And that's how you can join. Just be sure, the only thing I would remind you is just be sure when it asks you questions that you answer those, because we don't approve anybody to be in the group until they've answered those questions. We would love to have you. Todd, you love it, bro. Isn't it great?
It is. It's very, it's challenging, encouraging.
I'm glad you didn't go. No, it's terrible.
It's challenging, encouraging. You get ideas from people.
I love it.
And you see what God's doing around our state. That's what I love about it. Is you see pictures of youth groups. You see what God's doing down in South Georgia, West Georgia. And it's just amazing.
Yeah, different people that have different expertise coming together to help each other. I love it. So anyway, well, hey, thanks for joining us today. And one more thing, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and to leave a review.
Hey, and make sure that you join us for our next episode. Episode 34 is coming up. And as we look forward to next episode and just this next season, we just want to remind you that we are just so thankful for the Georgia Baptist Mission Board for allowing us to do this podcast and to connect with you, student ministry volunteers. We're so thankful, and we're thankful for the churches that give to our cooperative program. We appreciate y'all so much.
Yeah, if y'all need anything, you can find us at gabaptist.org/nextgen, or you can just go, check this out now, to studentministrynetwork.com, and you can find us there. So, hey, thanks again for listening. We'll see you next time on the Youth Ministry Podcast for Volunteers.